Let me tell you a story, little one, about one of nature's most remarkable creatures, the butterfly. You know, every time I see one dancing through my garden, it reminds me of the incredible lessons they teach us. I remember when I was about your age, I watched a caterpillar build its chrysalis on a branch near my window. Day after day, I'd check on it, waiting for something magical to happen. My mother told me to be patient, just like the caterpillar was being patient inside its tiny home. You see, inside that chrysalis, something extraordinary happens. The caterpillar doesn't just grow wings, it completely dissolves itself and rebuilds from scratch. Can you imagine having that kind of courage? To completely let go of who you are to become something new? When the butterfly finally emerged, it didn't immediately soar into the sky. It waited, allowing its wings to dry and strengthen. Nature's way of teaching us that even after a big change, we need to take our time, prepare ourselves for what's ahead. You know what's fascinating? Scientists have discovered that when a butterfly struggles to break free from its chrysalis, that struggle is essential. It's this very challenge that pushes fluid into their wings, making them strong enough to fly. If someone were to help the butterfly by breaking open the chrysalis, the butterfly would never develop the strength it needs. Life's a bit like that, isn't it? Sometimes our struggles, though difficult, are preparing us for something greater. Just like the butterfly, we all go through our own transformations. Maybe it's learning to read, making new friends, or facing our fears. Each challenge helps us grow stronger. And here's something else amazing about butterflies. They never worry about whether they're good enough to fly. They don't compare their wings to other butterflies or doubt their ability to soar. They simply spread their wings and trust in themselves. So whenever you're facing something difficult, or when change feels scary, remember the butterfly. Remember how it transforms from a crawling caterpillar into one of the most beautiful creatures in nature. Remember how it gains strength through struggle, and how it trusts itself to fly when the time is right. That's why I love watching butterflies in my garden. They remind me that change, though sometimes challenging, can lead to beautiful transformations. They remind me that patience, courage, and trust in ourselves are some of life's most important lessons. And you, my dear, are just like that butterfly, full of potential, ready to transform and soar in your own unique way, at your own perfect time. Hey there! Today, I want to share a special story my grandpa once told me about showing love to our parents. You know, he had this wise gleam in his eyes when he spoke about it. He said, "When I was young, I thought loving our parents was just about saying, 'I love you,' or buying them gifts on special occasions. But as I grew older, I realized it's so much more than that." Let me share 5 beautiful ways my grandpa taught me to express love for our parents. First, he emphasized the power of time. In this fast-paced world, he'd say, spending quality time with your parents is like giving them a piece of your life. Put down your phone, sit with them, and really listen to their stories. Those moments are priceless. The second way is through small, everyday actions. You know, those little things like making them a cup of tea in the morning, helping with household chores without being asked, or just giving them a warm hug when they least expect it. Those seemingly simple gestures speak volumes about your love. Third, my grandpa would stress the importance of sharing our lives with them. Your parents aren't just interested in your successes, he'd explain. They want to be part of your journey. The good, the bad, and everything in between. Share your dreams, your fears, and your everyday experiences with them. The fourth way is something we often overlook, showing respect and patience. As our parents age, they might repeat stories or take longer to understand new things. Grandpa taught me that showing patience during these moments is one of the purest forms of love we can offer. And finally, he'd always remind me about the power of gratitude. Tell them thank you, not just for the big things, but for all those countless moments they've been there for you. Thank them for their sacrifices, their guidance, and their unconditional love. You know what's beautiful about these 5 ways? They don't require money or grand gestures. They just need a sincere heart and conscious effort. As my grandpa would say, love isn't always about the big moments. It's about being there in all the small ones. So, take a moment today to think about how you show love to your parents. Sometimes the simplest actions can create the most meaningful connections. After all, they've given us a lifetime of love. Isn't it wonderful to give some of that back? Let me tell you about something fascinating I observed in my garden yesterday. A sight that made me pause and reflect. There was this tiny spider, no bigger than my fingernail, working tirelessly on its web between my tomato plants. You know, watching that little creature reminded me of the wisdom we often overlook in nature's simplest moments. This spider would throw its silk into the wind, waiting patiently for it to catch on to something. Sometimes it didn't work, but the spider never got frustrated. It just tried again and again. What really caught my attention was how methodical it was, each strand perfectly placed, each connection carefully tested. When the wind came and broke part of the web, the spider didn't give up. It simply started repairing, one thread at a time. No complaints, no drama, just pure determination. It reminded me of my younger days when I was building my first business. Things didn't always go as planned. But like that spider, I had to keep weaving my web of connections, strengthening weak spots and rebuilding after setbacks. You see, that spider taught me 3 important lessons that day. First, patience is more than just waiting. It's about staying focused on your goal even when progress seems slow. Second, setbacks aren't failures. They're just part of the process. And third, the most beautiful things in life often come from consistent, dedicated effort. This morning, I went back to check on my little 8-legged friend. The web was complete, glistening with dewdrops in the morning sun dot. It was simply perfect. And there sat the spider, not bragging about its achievement, just ready for whatever the new day might bring. Sometimes the best teachers in life don't speak a word. They just show us, through their actions, what it means to persist, to adapt, and to create something beautiful out of nothing but determination and skill. So next time you're feeling discouraged or thinking about giving up on something important, remember my garden spider. Nature has a wonderful way of showing us exactly what we need to learn, if only we take the time to notice. Let me tell you about something special that sits in my living room. My trusty old snake plant. You know, over the years, this remarkable plant has taught me quite a few life lessons that I think you might find interesting. I got this plant about 15 years ago, just a tiny little thing back then. What's fascinating about snake plants is their incredible resilience. You can forget to water them for weeks, leave them in a dark corner, or expose them to drafty windows. They'll still keep growing, standing tall and proud. You see, snake plants remind me of the importance of adaptability in life. Just like how they can thrive in both bright light and shade, we too need to learn to adapt to different circumstances. Sometimes life puts us in the spotlight, other times in the shadows. But what matters is our ability to make the best of where we are. Another beautiful thing about snake plants is their patience. They grow slowly but steadily. In our world of instant gratification, where everyone wants success overnight, this plant teaches us that sustainable growth takes time. I've watched my snake plant grow inch by inch, year after year, never rushing, just consistently doing its thing. What's really remarkable is how these plants clean the air around them. They work silently, removing toxins, making the environment better for everyone. It reminds me that we don't always need to make a big show of our contributions. Sometimes the most meaningful work happens quietly, behind the scenes. And you know what else? Snake plants don't need constant attention or care to thrive. They teach us about self-reliance and inner strength. In life, while it's wonderful to have support, we must also learn to stand on our own. Just like this sturdy plant. Even when parts of the plant get damaged, it doesn't give up. New leaves grow, life continues. That's perhaps the most important lesson: resilience in the face of adversity. No matter what life throws at us, we can always find a way to grow again. So next time you see a snake plant, remember, be adaptable, be patient, work quietly for the good of others, stay strong independently, and never give up. These simple plants, they're really quite wise teachers, wouldn't you say? You know, in all my years, I've learned that sometimes the best life lessons come from the most unexpected places. Even from a humble plant sitting in the corner of your living room. Hey kids, gather around! Your grandpa's got a fascinating story to share today about one of nature's most magnificent creatures, the lion, the true king of the jungle. You know, watching these majestic animals has taught me some incredible life lessons that I think you'll find pretty interesting. I remember when I was just a little older than you, I had the chance to witness a lion family in the wild during a safari in Africa. The sight of that male lion, with his magnificent mane flowing in the wind, standing proudly on a rocky outcrop, is something I'll never forget. But you know what's really interesting? Despite being the strongest and most feared animal in the savannah, lions don't actually spend their days showing off or bullying other animals. Instead, they know exactly when to use their strength and when to conserve their energy. They're patient, strategic, and incredibly wise. The lion teaches us that true leadership isn't about constantly roaring and showing your power. It's about knowing when to step up and when to step back. The male lion, for example, might look lazy when he's resting under the shade of an acacia tree, but he's actually staying alert, protecting his pride and conserving energy for when it really matters. You see, kids, just like the lion, we don't need to prove ourselves every minute of every day. Sometimes the wisest thing to do is to stay calm, observe, and wait for the right moment. That's what real strength is about. And here's something else amazing about lions. They understand the power of family. They live in prides, working together, protecting each other, and sharing responsibilities. The cubs learn from watching the adults, just like you learn from watching us. You know what else I love about lions? They never give up. When times get tough, when food is scarce, they keep going. They adapt, they work harder, and they stay strong for their pride. That's a pretty important lesson for all of us, isn't it? So, my dear grandchildren, whenever you face challenges in life, remember the lion. Remember that true strength isn't about being the loudest or the most aggressive. It's about being wise, patient, and resilient. It's about knowing when to act and when to wait. And most importantly, it's about taking care of the ones you love. And just like the lion remains the king of the jungle, not because he's the biggest or the scariest, but because he's earned the respect of all other animals through his actions, you too can earn respect and achieve great things by following these principles. That's the story of the lion, kids. Pretty amazing how much we can learn from nature, isn't it? Let me tell you about something that happened when I was a kid. A moment that my grandpa taught me one of life's most valuable lessons. It was a busy Saturday morning at our local diner. and I was there with my grandpa for our weekly breakfast tradition. That day, a man walked in wearing tattered clothes. His hair was messy, and he had this worn-out backpack. I remember whispering to my grandpa, "He looks scary." My grandpa just smiled and kept sipping his coffee. As we sat there, the man took a seat at the counter. Some people moved away, others whispered, and the waitress seemed hesitant to serve him. But then something unexpected happened. The man pulled out a wallet, and from it, he took out several $100 bills. He announced to everyone that he wanted to pay for everyone's breakfast in the diner. The silence in the room was deafening. But that wasn't all, Dot. He started telling his story. He was a successful software developer who had just finished a year-long project living minimally and donating most of his earnings to homeless shelters. He chose to live simply because it reminded him of where he came from and kept him grounded. My grandpa turned to me with that knowing look in his eyes and said, "You see, kiddo, that man just taught you something precious. Never judge a book by its cover. The richest stories often hide behind the simplest covers." Years later, I still carry that lesson with me. Every time I catch myself making quick judgments about people, I remember that morning at the diner. My grandpa's wisdom rings true. We're all walking stories, and you never know what incredible chapters lie within someone until you take the time to read them. You know what's funny? That man in the diner changed not just my perspective that day, but everyone's. The same people who were whispering about him earlier were now sharing their meals with him, listening to his stories and learning from his experiences. So, next time you're quick to judge someone based on their appearance, remember my grandpa's lesson. Take a moment to look deeper, to be curious rather than critical, because sometimes the most extraordinary people come in the most ordinary packages, and the most beautiful stories aren't always bound in the fanciest covers. Let me tell you a story. One that my grandfather shared with me on a chilly evening as we sat by the fireplace. His eyes sparkled with wisdom as he began talking about wolves, those mysterious creatures that have fascinated humans for generations. "You see," he said, leaning forward in his old leather chair, "wolves have always been misunderstood. Most people think of them as fierce, dangerous predators. But there's so much more to learn from these remarkable animals." He told me about a wolf pack he once observed in his younger days as a forest ranger. The way they moved together, protected each other, and worked as one unit left a lasting impression on him. "In all my years," he said, "I've never seen such loyalty and teamwork in the natural world." What struck him most was how the pack cared for its weakest members. When food was scarce, they would ensure the young, old, and injured wolves ate first. The strongest hunters would often go hungry to make sure others survived. That's true strength, my grandfather would say. Not just having power, but knowing how to use it to help others. He shared a particular story about an old wolf he named Grey Shadow. This wolf could no longer hunt with the pack, but instead of abandoning him, the younger wolves would bring food back to him. They'd even slow their pace during travels to make sure he could keep up. Nature's greatest lesson, Grandpa said, is that survival isn't just about being the strongest or the fastest. It's about being part of something bigger than yourself. The most fascinating part was how wolves communicate. They use not just howls, but subtle body language, facial expressions, and various vocalizations. In many ways, he'd chuckle, they're better at communicating than most humans I know. As the fire crackled that evening, Grandpa's final words stayed with me. Life isn't about being a lone wolf. It's about finding your pack, protecting each other, and understanding that true strength lies in how we care for one another. That's what the wolves taught me, and that's what I hope you'll remember. Now, Whenever I hear a wolf howl in the distance, I think of my grandfather's words and the profound wisdom these magnificent creatures have to share with us all. Let me tell you about my grandpa, a man who taught me one of life's most valuable lessons through an unexpected encounter with a great white shark. It was a warm summer evening when I sat on our old porch swing, feeling defeated after losing a job opportunity I'd been counting on. My grandpa, noticing my slumped shoulders, pulled up his favorite rocking chair beside me. "You know," he began, his eyes twinkling with that familiar wisdom, "back in '72, I had my own dance with failure and a shark." I perked up immediately. "Dot, in all our years together, I'd never heard this story," he continued. "I was a young fisherman then, trying to prove myself on these waters. One day, I encountered the biggest great white I'd ever seen. It was destroying our nets, threatening our livelihood. Everyone told me to give up, find safer waters, maybe even a different profession. But you know what I learned that day? That shark wasn't my enemy. It was my teacher. Instead of fighting it, I studied its patterns. Where others saw a monster, I saw nature's perfect design. I learned to fish in harmony with these creatures, developed new techniques, and eventually became one of the most successful fishermen in the area." His weathered hands gripped the chair's armrests as he leaned forward. "Sometimes what looks like our biggest obstacle becomes our greatest opportunity for growth. That shark forced me to innovate, to think differently, to become better than I ever thought possible." Life's going to throw sharks at you, kid. Big ones, not scary ones. But remember, it's not about the size of the shark. It's about how you choose to navigate those waters. Every setback is setting you up for a comeback. You know what's funny? Years later, I discovered that Grandpa had never actually encountered that shark. He made up the story to help me through my tough time. But the lesson, that was as real as it gets. And now, whenever I face my own sharks, those seemingly insurmountable challenges, I think of my grandpa's story. Sometimes the biggest obstacles in our path aren't there to stop us. They're there to direct us towards a better route. So, whatever shark you're facing right now, remember, it might just be the very thing that pushes you to become who you're meant to be. After all, some of life's best lessons come wrapped in scales and sharp teeth, real or imaginary. That's what my grandpa taught me. And now, I'm passing it on to you.
Sound of creaking rocking chair. You know, little one, there's a story that's been passed down through generations. It's about a young man who discovered that sometimes the greatest treasures aren't what they seem at first glance. Get comfortable and let me tell you about Aladdin. In the narrow, winding streets of an ancient city, there lived a poor boy named Aladdin. Now he wasn't much different from you, full of dreams, but perhaps a bit too quick to look for easy ways to get what he wanted. Chuckles softly. One day, a mysterious stranger approached Aladdin, claiming to be his long-lost uncle. He promised Aladdin riches beyond imagination if he would help retrieve an old lamp from a cave. Of course, this uncle wasn't what he seemed. He was actually a powerful sorcerer with dark intentions. Whispers. Deep in the cave, surrounded by mountains of gold and precious stones, Aladdin found something that would change his life forever. A dusty, unremarkable lamp. But you see, sometimes the most ordinary-looking things hold the most extraordinary secrets. When Aladdin discovered the genie within the lamp, he thought all his problems were solved. 3 wishes, anything he wanted. But you know what's interesting? The real magic wasn't in the wishes at all. The real magic was in what Aladdin learned about himself. Through his adventures, Aladdin discovered that true wealth isn't about having endless riches or magical powers. It's about being clever enough to see opportunities, brave enough to face challenges, and wise enough to use your gifts to help others. Voice getting softer. You see, my dear, Aladdin could have wished for endless wealth, but instead, he chose to wish for things that would help him become the person he was meant to be. He learned that the greatest power we have isn't in magic lamps or wonderful wishes, it's in our own hearts and minds. And you know what? That's the real treasure of this story. Whether you're a street boy like Aladdin or a princess in a palace, your true worth comes from who you are inside and the choices you make, yawning softly. So remember, little one, as you drift off to sleep tonight, you don't need a magic lamp to make your dreams come true. You just need to believe in yourself, work hard, and always keep your heart in the right place. Sweet dreams, my precious grandchild. May your adventures be as magical as Aladdin's, but may your wisdom grow even greater than his. Sound of gentle humming fading out.